I would like to welcome everyone to the second of two recitals today. The first recital was the spring recital and it went absolutely fantastic. It was a ton of fun to put together. This recital is the Composer Spotlight Recital and it features the works of Robert and Clara Schumann. I decided to go ahead and keep this as close to the original as possible, which also meant having students do their talking points, and instead of being able to fit a handful or so of images on the program, obviously because I can do it on video, I was able to add a little bit more. So it will be a little more interesting, I think, to kind of see some of the things that the students will be talking about in their talking points. And I would just like to say that the videos are absolutely amazing. This is some really hard music and everyone is really challenged on this recital. Getting half of these done in studio and then the other half, which is the refining and the musicality and the memorizing and all of that kind of put together just, via a Skype piano lesson is pretty incredible. I mean, it's definitely a wonderful way to still continue teaching, and I'm surprised, even though I've done this many times before doing Skype lessons, at how well it works and how wonderful their pieces really have come out. So the Clara and Robert Schumann, you're going to learn a little bit about them, like I said, kind of between the videos. And I knew who Robert was growing up because Schumann was just someone I had played several pieces from. I had no idea that there was a female counterpart until I got to college. One of my professors said I would be playing one of Clara's pieces, and I had no idea who he's talking about. And I just remember looking at the blue cover and it had big 5 letters of Clara on the front going, this is a woman. And I've never played a female composer that I can really remember before. And the fact that her music was as beautiful as it was, I was just shocked that I didn't know who she was and kind of a little annoyed by that. So it really delved me into exposing my students to composers that they're not as familiar with. So you'll see that a lot of fall festival pieces or study program pieces, like when they do like a bigger work, that they are not kind of the typical repertoire, and that I try to find stuff that would not be typically done. And it's kind of amazing how much music is out there that is not heard quite as often. So this particular duo of Robert and Clara is quite fascinating, and I think it will make for a wonderful recital, and I cannot wait for everyone to hear all the videos. So before we start, as a reminder, I do have a musical kind of a quiz for the students, just to some are going to be too hard, and then some of them are not going to be, but they should make you think a little bit about some of the form and style and some of the commentary that is going in between the videos, and I would like to go over those and kind of see how everybody did at their next lesson this week. Without any further ado, we will go ahead and get this recital started.
The 19th century saw the solo piano and its repertory at the height of popularity, with the emergence of a group of master composers for the piano, including Franz Liszt, Frédéric Chopin, Johannes Brahms, Felix Mendelssohn, and Robert Schumann. Schumann was perhaps the most enigmatic of the group, a mercurial figure that suffered throughout his adult life from mental illness. His compositional output was characterized by periods of extreme obsession with a particular musical genre, such as chamber music, symphony, or art song.
Schumann was born on June 8, 1810 in Zwickau, Germany. Unlike many of Schumann's musical peers, he was not a child prodigy and was even considered an average student in music. In spite of his slow start, Schumann decided to become a concert pianist. His ambitions of being a performer were soon squelched, though, when he began to suffer from paralysis in his right hand. Schumann irreparably injured his own hand by wearing a chiroplast, a medical device worn while practicing the piano meant to strengthen the fourth finger. As Schumann's hopes for a career as a pianist faded, his skill as a composer and writer began to emerge. In his role as a music critic, he helped to discover and promote the careers of both Chopin and Brahms, writing favorable reviews of their new pieces in the New Journal of Music.
Clara Wieck was born a few years later than Robert Schumann on September 13, 1819 in Leipzig, Germany, near the beginning of what is generally referred to as the Romantic era in music. A pianist, composer, and piano teacher, she was regarded as one of the most distinguished pianists of this era. Clara exerted her influence over a 61-year concert career, changing the format and repertoire of the piano recital from displays of virtuosity to programs of serious works. Clara's father, Frederick Weick, chose her name because it meant brilliant and bright. He fully expected her to be a brilliant musician, trained by him from birth. She grew up in a household where the sounds of music were heard constantly. Her father gave piano lessons to many students who came and went and sold instruments at their shop in Leipzig. Although a little shy and quite different from Robert Schumann, Clara was a child prodigy. She had actively belonged to some of the most elite circles of musicians in Leipzig. She was musically stimulated not only by her father's teachings, but by many German romantics. At the age of 11, Clara went on her first extended tour. She also published 4 polonaises for the piano labeled Opus 1 in 1831. Erica will now be performing Polonaise in C major, Opus 1, number 2.
Clara was an instant success on the tour and everywhere she played. Aristocratic ladies vied with each other to bestow rings, chains, and earrings on Clara. Her father was careful to make sure that her head was not turned by praise and gifts. He wrote in his journal, "If I notice anything the least bit damaging, I will leave immediately so that she can be in orderly middle-class surroundings. I'm too proud of her unpretentiousness to exchange it for any worldly honors."
It is interesting to note here, for those of you experienced with the task of memorizing music, that at the tender age of 13, Clara was one of the first pianists to perform from memory. It is because of her that memorizing music is now more or less required. The public reaction to Clara's new approach was ambiguous. Although audiences must have been enthralled, the novelist Bettina von Arnim characterized Clara's behavior as arrogant because she departed from the standard of performing from the score. Until then, performance from memory was only allowed for free improvisation. It is more likely that Clara could perform more freely and expressively without needing to refer to the score. This unfair advantage was not something her fellow performers were fond of.
And now we continue. In the summer of 1830, when Clara was preparing for her first solo concert in Leipzig, something took place that was to have a profound impact on Clara's life. A new student moved into the Weik household named Robert Schumann. He had arrived in Leipzig earlier that year in order to pursue his passion for music after abandoning a career in law. Clara's father was like a legend to Robert, and he felt quite lucky to be taking piano lessons from Mr. Weik. At first, Clara's father was oblivious to their relationship, but when his suspicions were at last aroused, his first reaction was to remove his daughter from Leipzig in January of 1836. In the beginning, Robert persisted in the belief that Clara's father would approve of their marriage. He thought that Mr. Weik would be overjoyed to see his daughter together with a talented musician such as himself. Unfortunately, this is not the case.
Clara knew she was in love with Robert, but she loved her father and the musical success she enjoyed as a result of all of his hard work. Her music and career still remained the center of her life. Clara's father wrote letters to Robert informing him that all connections with their household were over. He and Clara continued touring together, and it was a miserably unhappy tour. For almost a year and a half, Clara and Robert did not see each other and rarely communicated. Within the next 2 years, however, Clara would take her own first faltering steps on pursuing her love for Robert. Clara's 4 character pieces were composed between 1834 and 1836. The entire work is labeled as Opus 5 and is written for solo piano. Amazingly, these were composed when Clara was only 15 years old and published when she was only 17 years old. Noelle will now be performing the aptly titled Romance Opus 5, number 3.
was also during this emotionally tumultuous time that Clara composed her Soirée Musicales, Opus 6. The time of compositions in this opus are typical of her previous publications. Soirée Musicales consist of Toccatina, Ballade, Notturno, Polonaise, Mazurka, and Mazurka. The set is dedicated to Henrietta Voigt. Kate will now be performing Mazurka, Opus 6, number 5.
During the long separation, Robert threw himself into his work, composing, studying, writing, and collaborating with some of the Romantic era's great musicians. These were the years when Robert Schumann created some of his best-known works. Scenes from Childhood is one of several pieces comprising short musical pictures. Published in 1838, Schumann wrote 30 movements for this work, but chose 13 for the final version. He later commented to Clara that these 30 small droll things, most of them less than a page in length, were inspired by her comment that he sometimes seemed like a child. He described them in 1840 as more cheerful, gentler, more melodic than his earlier works. Movement number 7 of the work, Träumerei, is one of Schumann's best-known pieces. In Russia, a hummed choral a cappella version became known as morning music, being played annually during the Minute of Silence on Victory Day. Cruz will now be performing our first Robert Schumann piece, titled Träumerei, Opus 15, number 7.
When Robert Schumann wrote Scenes from Childhood, he was deeply in love with Clara Wieck, soon to become his wife, over the objections of her overbearing father. In 1837, when she was 18, Robert proposed to Clara and she accepted. Clara declared to her father her intention to move away and to marry him. Frederick Wieck was strongly opposed to the marriage and refused his permission. Robert and Clara decided to go to court and sue him. The judge allowed the marriage, which took place on September 12, 1840, the day before Clara's 21st birthday. Almost exactly 1 year after marriage, Clara gave birth to their first and most loved child, Marie. Over the next 13 years, they have 7 more children. Clara loved her family dearly, but did not let it put an end to her love for performing music. They both continued to tour occasionally, enjoying much success. By 1842, she enjoyed a full revival of her solo career.
In August of 1844, Robert suffers a severe mental and physical breakdown. Clara abandoned plans for another concert tour and devotes herself entirely to Robert and his health. Several cures are attempted, but nothing seems to help. Robert was still composing during that time and was concerned about the poor quality of pedagogical piano music available for teaching his own young daughters. The household Clara and Schumann created with their 8 children centered almost entirely around music and their family. At a time when men often distanced themselves from the daily rigors of parenting, Schumann was an involved father who participated in his children's play and education. Inspired by his home life, Schumann wrote a great deal of Hausmusik, modest everyday music to be practiced and performed in the home. According to Clara, these sets grew from the games Schumann watched his children play.
Robert's initial essay in this genre, The Album for the Young, Opus 68, not only revolutionized attitudes concerning music education, but also inaugurated an entirely new genre of piano literature, programmatic music written explicitly for children. The spectacular and instantaneous success of the album inspired Schumann to write many more pieces for children, spawned a host of copycat publications, and most importantly, popularized a forward-looking pedagogical philosophy whose ramifications extended into the 20th century. Armand will perform the 5th selection from this opus titled Little Piece, Opus 68, number 5. This piece is in the friendly key of C major, and the melody begins on beat 3 rather than the downbeat. The added instruction for this piece states to be played after schoolwork is finished.
Certainly one of the more famous pieces from the entire album, Wild Rider uses a 6/8 meter and staccato touch. Mindful perhaps of the need for strengthening left-hand technique, Schumann gives the melody to the left hand in the B section. Benjamin will now perform Wild Rider. Next, Chloe will perform the 10th selection from Album for the Young titled The Merry Farmer, Returning from Work. This is one of the most treasured pieces in the student repertoire and is aptly characterized by Clara Schumann. First, the father sings alone. In the second part, his little boy chimes in. Ludwig Wichter's drawing for the first edition charmingly illustrates this scene. The next piece we will hear is the 18th selection from Album for the Young, performed by Samita, The Reaper's Song. The drone of the French bagpipe in the left hand and the grace notes reminiscent of a bagpiper's embellishments in the right hand give this piece its rustic charm. Schumann returns to the key of C major and to 6/8 meter, skillfully reinforcing previous concepts. Mindful also of equal development of the hands, Schumann writes the legato melody for both hands in octave unison in the middle of the piece, requiring careful attention to fingering. The 23rd selection from Album for the Young, titled The Horseman, will be performed by Adarsh. This stunning miniature could be characterized as a wild rider for more grown-up ones. The Horseman is written in a minor key, the same as the piece Benjamin played. The vivid sound images created by the galloping cadence of broken octaves, challenging rhythms, distinct articulations, bold accents, and sweeping dynamics all come together to create an exhilarating sensation as the horseman approaches from afar, arrives triumphantly, and then vanishes on the horizon. Last but not least, Julia will perform the 30th selection from this opus titled... That's right, we don't have a direct explanation from Robert Schumann regarding the enigmatic trio of stars written above 3 of his pieces from the album. However, when his daughter asked Clara about them, she replied, "Perhaps your father wanted the stars to reflect parents' thoughts about their children." It is interesting to note that in the original manuscript, the images are handwritten as asterisks, but in the first published edition, they appear as 5 pointed stars. Number 30 is one of the lesser known pieces in the entire album. Its introspective nature and relatively moderate technical demands in a slower tempo make it a perfect piece for the returning adult student or reticent teen.
Robert Schumann's intention to create valuable and sensibly created music for children and young people was not limited to the world-famous album for the young. He also created 2 works which encouraged 4-handed piano playing, which is very popular in the 19th century domestic music. Today we will hear selections from Schumann's 12 4-hand piano works for small and large children, Opus 85. This collection turns out, in summary, to be Schumann's last great collection of piano literature. 3 selections will be performed today. A piece for 3 hands by Miss Hansen and Erica, and 2 4-hand pieces by Adarsh and Benjamin and Adarsh and Noel.
winter of 1854, Schumann's insanity manifested itself dramatically. Over the next decade, his symptoms escalated so drastically that he insisted on being institutionalized. Clara was not allowed to visit him until July of 1856. 2 days later, he died at the age of 46. Published during Robert's institutionalization and one of her most mature works, Clara Schumann's Three Romances, Opus 21, No. 1, simultaneously encapsulates her musical preferences after half a lifetime of extensive musical study and reflects the strictures applied to women's music at the time. During the Common Practice period, music critics would deride music by women that sounded too masculine or at least not feminine enough. Women could not write more progressive music without risking a backlash from the music critics. However, Clara's music also had to earn the respect of her more progressive fellow composers. In our final piece today, she achieved that balance by employing a very classical formal structure and a distinctly romantic, if somewhat restrained, harmonic language. Her true artistic and compositional talents shine forth despite, and perhaps even due to, the limits in which her music had to reside. Pranav will now be performing Clara Schumann's Three Romances, Opus 21, No. 1.
After Robert's early death, Clara Wieck Schumann spent the better part of her long and fruitful life performing and publishing the works of her husband. She continued to tour Europe while raising their 6 children and is often single-handedly credited with popularizing Robert's music and giving him the reverence and legacy his work enjoys today. Clara lived to be 76 years old, having been an opinionated and influential member of the music community. She died in Frankfurt, but was buried in Bonn beside her husband.
There is little doubt that Robert Schumann will remain a canonic figure. His abilities at times fell short of his ambitions, but he brought enthusiasm and a rare poetic genius to everything he attempted. As a music critic, he was remarkably astute in some judgments, wildly off the mark in others, and in all cases, generous. He never became a great pianist, but his entire being was music, informed by dream and fantasy. He was music's quintessential romantic, always ardent, always striving for the ideal. Most of Clara Schumann's own music was never played by anyone else and largely forgotten until a resurgence of interest in the 1970s. Today, her compositions are increasingly performed and recorded. The music and lives of Robert and Clara Schumann will go down as one of music's most gut-wrenching and prolific love stories.
Thank you all for watching the second video this afternoon. The pieces were absolutely stunning. It's so much work to get these pieces ready in a normal environment and then having to do them kind of in a half and half scenario and then submitting videos. I know that was really hard for some of the students. Hard more in the sense that, again, you want to get it right. This must be my 16th take of what I'm saying to you right now. And it's still probably not perfect. So I completely understand what it's like getting through a song and something goes wrong and you had to hit delete and you got to try again. So I know that they worked really hard because these videos were really wonderful today. I would like to thank the parents also for all of their hard work on keeping the lessons consistent and the practicing going, and it has made a really, really big difference. And I'm already looking towards summers and falls and trying to see what we can do and how to make this as close to kind of a normal experience as possible. So have a wonderful afternoon, and I look forward to seeing everyone this week.